Hello everyone, welcome to a new video lesson. In the last video lesson, we had been discussing about what language is, skill, sub-skill, and we even discussed on what listening and speaking is. In this video lesson, we are going to explore the different realms of listening. Listening, as I already told you, is an active performance. Effective listening is a desirable skill and it can be cultivated over time. Now, if you look into the different perspectives of listening, I shall tell you that there are two different perspectives. Listening as comprehension and the second one is listening as acquisition. Listening as comprehension. We shall now discuss that in detail. Listening as comprehension is the traditional way of thinking about the nature of listening. The main function of listening in second language learning is to facilitate understanding of spoken discourse. Comprehension begins with the data that has been received, which is analyzed as successive levels of organization, that is, as sounds, words, clauses, sentences, texts, until meaning is arrived at. Comprehension is viewed as a process of decoding. The listener's lexical and grammatical competence in a language is very important. The input is scanned for familiar words, and grammatical knowledge is used to work out the relationship between elements of the sentence. Traditional classroom listening activities focus primarily on exercises such as dictation, the use of multiple choice questions after a text, and similar activities which require close and detailed recognition and processing of the input, and which assume that everything the listener needs to understand is contained in the input. Now we shall move through some tasks. Say in a classroom setting, if the students are asked to listen to a positive and negative statement and they are asked to choose an appropriate form of agreement, yes, we shall go through some examples, some situations. If the teacher says or the speaker says, "That's a nice camera." So how would the student respond? What would be the response? Yes, that's a nice camera. Yes, it's a nice camera. This isn't a good coffee. Yes, it isn't. This meal is really tasty. Yes, the meal is tasty. That's not a very good one. No, it's not a good one. See, according to the responses given by the student, you can analyze how the student has understood or what listening activity the student has done. Another instance I shall tell you. See, in this particular activity, the listening is done for word stress as a marker of the information focusing on a sentence. Students listen to questions that has two possible information focuses and use stress to identify the appropriate focus. For example, is the city office open on Sunday? So in this question, we know it is an interrogative statement, interrogative sentence. So over here, how would you say or what answer would you give? Yes, it's open. Okay. I'm going to the museum today. I'm going to the museum today. Where are you going? As a listener, some prompt questions comes to you. Where are you going? When are you going? Okay. Now we shall move into the third task. In this activity, it helps the students develop the ability to identify the keywords. Teacher, when she reads a passage and the students are asked to mark the keywords. For example, I shall give you a passage of 2 or 3 lines. My hometown is a nice place to visit because it is close to a beach and there are lots of interesting walks you can do in the surrounding countryside. The teacher, she reads out the passage and the students are asked to mark the keywords like hometown, beachside, countryside, interesting. Okay, so all these activities or all these tasks are given to the students to enhance their ability of listening. The pre-listening phase prepares the students through activities involving activating prior knowledge, making predictions, and reviewing key vocabulary. The listening phase focuses on comprehension through exercises which require selective listening, gist listening, sequencing, etc. In the post-listening phase, you can see that it typically involves a response to comprehension and may require students to give opinions about a topic. When a text is examined in detail, it involves a microanalysis of sections so as to enable each and every student to recognize features such as blends, reduced words, ellipses, and so on, and other features of spoken discourses that they were unable to process or recognized earlier. Now, we shall just move into some listening strategies. Successful listening can also be looked at in terms of the strategies the listener makes use of when listening. Does the learner focus mainly on the content of a text, or does he or she also consider how to listen? A focus on how to listen raises the issues of listening strategies. Strategies can be thought of as the ways in which a learner approaches and manages a task, and listeners can be taught effective ways of approaching and managing their listening. These activities seek to involve listeners actively in the process of listening. We shall just discuss about two strategies in detail. The first strategy is cognitive strategy. Now, what is cognitive strategy? Those mental activities related to comprehending and storing input in working memory or long-term memory for later retrieval is known as cognitive strategy. Now, in this particular strategy, you can see some sub-skills which is meant while doing this listening strategy. The first one is comprehension processes. Now, this particular task, it is associated with the processing of linguistic and non-linguistic input. The second one is storing and memory processes. This is associated with the storing of linguistic and non-linguistic input in working memory or long-term memory. The next one is using and retrieval processes. This is associated with accessing memory to be readied for output. Now, the second category or the second strategy is metacognitive strategies. Now, what is metacognitive strategy? Those conscious or unconscious mental activities that perform an executive function in the management of cognitive strategies are called as metacognitive strategies. Now, you can see it in different phases. The first phase is assessing the situation. Taking stock of conditions surrounding a language task by assessing one's own knowledge or one's available internal or external resources and the constraints of the situation before engaging in a task. The second phase is monitoring. It determines the effectiveness of one's own or another's performance while engaging in a task. The third one is self-evaluating. It determines the effectiveness of one's own or another's performance after engaging in the activity. And the last phase in the metacognitive strategy is self-testing. It tests oneself to determine the effectiveness of one's own language use or the lack thereof. Now we shall move into the second perspective, that is listening as acquisition. Our discussion so far has dealt with one perspective on listening, namely listening as comprehension. Everything we have discussed has been based on the assumption that the role of listening in a language program is to help develop learners' abilities to understand things they listen to. This approach to teaching of listening has been based on the following assumptions. Listening serves the goal of extracting meanings from messages. The language of utterance, that is, the specific words or syntax, expressions used by the speakers, these are temporary carriers of meaning. Once meaning has been identified, there is no further need to attend to the form of messages unless problems in understanding occur. Teaching listening strategies can help the learners to be more effective listeners. Learners need to take part in activities which require them to try out and experiment in using newly noticed language forms in order to understand new learning items and to incorporate them into their linguistic repertoire. So this is all for now. We shall meet in the next video lesson. Thank you.